ever imagine a world completely without water? Like not a single drop.
Ooh, that sends chills down my spine just thinking about it.
Right. It's like something out of a dystopian sci-fi movie. And that's actually where we're kicking off this deep dive with a speculative podcast script that paints a pretty eerie picture of Earth without that essential H2O.
I actually just read that one. Definitely a thought-provoking way to grasp how crucial water is to, well, pretty much everything. It's like the script describes a totally barren wasteland. No oceans, no rivers, nothing. Couldn't support life as we know it.
Yeah, like the whole planet would just be this huge desert, right?
Pretty much. And the temperatures. Forget about it. Crazy swings between scorching hot during the day and then freezing cold at night.
Okay, yeah, I'm officially freaked out now. But that's still kind of, fiction. What about the very real water crisis happening right now? That's got to be a bit different, right?
Definitely different, but no less concerning. And that's where other sources come in. We've got this really compelling article that dives deep into water scarcity, specifically in Honduras, and then a blog post laying out the potential global consequences if we don't address this crisis head on.
And it is a crisis, right? I mean, I feel like we hear that word thrown around a lot, but in this case...
Yeah, the article doesn't mince words. It really emphasizes how out of all the water on Earth, only a tiny fraction, like about 1%, is the fresh water that we actually rely on.
Seriously, just 1%. That's wild.
It's a pretty shocking statistic. And that scarcity, it hits hard in places like Honduras, which the article uses as a case study. It highlights this really heartbreaking story of a woman named Nicole who's basically forced to make impossible choices like every single day between buying water or putting food on the table for her family.
That's just heartbreaking.
It really drives home how water scarcity isn't just this abstract environmental issue, It's deeply intertwined with social and economic inequality. Like in Honduras, some people have to work for 20 days straight just to be able to afford a single tank of clean water.
Whoa. That's longer than most people get paid in a month some places. It's crazy to think about how much privilege factors into something as essential as having access to clean water.
It's a huge factor. And the article makes this really important point that it's not just people in like developing nations or whatever. It argues that even people who can comfortably afford water right now, they might face challenges in the future as water scarcity increases. Like we're talking about water stress potentially becoming a global problem.
Water stress, what exactly does that mean?
So basically water stress is when the demand for water starts to outstrip the available supply. Like imagine if your city announced water restrictions because the reservoirs are running dangerously low. That's a form of water stress.
Okay, yeah, now this is feeling way too real. So Honduras, that's obviously a very stark example. But what about zooming out? Big picture. What happens if this crisis continues to escalate on like a global scale?
Well, that's where this blog post takes a pretty dramatic but effective approach. It basically lays out what would happen if, hypothetically, Earth just lost all of its water.
Like that sci-fi podcast script, but for real?
Exactly. It uses that extreme scenario to highlight just how interconnected everything on this planet really is. We're talking mass extinctions, entire ecosystems collapsing, and climate change becoming even more extreme and unpredictable. Remember in that podcast script how it mentions water acting like Earth's thermostat?
Yeah, it's like this whole planet-wide temperature regulation system, right?
Precisely. Water has this incredible ability to absorb and release heat, which is a major factor in regulating the Earth's temperature. The blog post drives home the point that without water, we'd be looking at a planet of insanely hot days and then freezing nights, basically uninhabitable for humans.
And I'm guessing even if we don't magically lose all our water, those changes would still be pretty catastrophic, to say the least, right?
Oh, absolutely. Even small shifts in water availability can cause ripple effects on everything: ecosystems, weather patterns, agricultural systems. And as that article pointed out, when those systems get disrupted, that's when we start to see social and economic instability rear its ugly head.
So it's like this vicious cycle. And you know what's even scarier? There's this quote in the article from the president of the World Resources Institute, and they say, water stress is the biggest crisis no one is talking about. Like, that feels like a ticking time bomb.
It kind of is. And the thing is, this isn't just about, like, running out of drinking water, The podcast script we started with, it actually touches on this, too. Remember how it asks us to imagine the impact on industries?
Oh, right. Like, what happens when you don't have water for agriculture or manufacturing? Everything would just grind to a halt.
Exactly. Water is essential for pretty much every aspect of modern life. Growing food, producing energy, you name it. So this scarcity is not just an environmental or social problem. It's a huge economic threat, too.
Right, it's all connected. Which I feel like is kind of the recurring theme here, isn't it? This sense of a fragile cycle that keeps, well, everything in balance. And that blog post with its extreme example of Earth losing all its water, that really drove that point home.
Yeah, it's definitely a thought experiment, but it forces us to really confront those potential consequences if we don't change our ways.
So what can we do? Like, is there any hope here? Because honestly, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed right now.
I hear you. It's a massive, complex challenge. But the article does offer some potential solutions. It talks a lot about the importance of sustainable water management practices, like more efficient irrigation systems and reducing water waste in cities, stuff like that.
So it's not just about finding these like new sources of water, but also being smarter about how we use what we already have.
Exactly. And it's not just about technology either. The article also really emphasizes the importance of education. Like, people need to understand where their water comes from, how much they're using, the impact of their choices, all of that.
That makes sense. Knowledge is power, right? The more aware people are of the problem, the more likely they are to be part of the solution.
100%. And it's
Yeah.
about shifting our mindset. For
Yeah.
too long, we've treated water as this unlimited resource. But as these sources make clear, it's really not. We need to start thinking about it as something precious, something we need to conserve and protect for future generations.
And this might be a naive question, but what about things like desalination? I feel like I always hear about that as a potential solution.
Yeah, desalination is definitely part of the conversation. For those who don't know, it's basically removing salt from seawater to make it drinkable. And it's becoming increasingly important, especially in coastal regions. But it's energy intensive and still pretty expensive, so there are still hurdles to overcome in terms of making it a more widely accessible solution.
So not a magic bullet.
Right. It seems like with this issue, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. But the article also talks about the need for international collaboration, which is huge, because water scarcity doesn't respect borders, obviously. So finding solutions requires countries to work together, especially when it comes to shared water resources like rivers and lakes.
Yeah, that does sound kind of like a tall order, especially with how politically charged things can get. But I do appreciate that the article at least offers some concrete steps forward. Even if it's not a quick fix, it's reassuring to know that there are things we can do.
Totally. And that we're at least starting to have these conversations. Going back to that quote about water stress being the crisis, no one's talking about, well, we got to change that. We have to be the ones talking about it, raising awareness, pushing for solutions.
Consider it done. It's funny, thinking back to that wild podcast script about a world without water, it really highlights how precious and unique our planet is.
It really does. And it makes you wonder, if life could theoretically evolve around other liquids, as the script suggests, then what does that say about our responsibility to protect the water we do have here on Earth?
Whoa, that's a really powerful thought. It's not just about us, is it? It's about making sure future generations inherit a world where water isn't a source of conflict or scarcity, but like a shared resource that sustains us all.
Well said. It's about recognizing that we're not just passive inhabitants of this planet. We have an active role to play in protecting it.
Okay, so to wrap things up, dear listener, the next time you turn on the tap, maybe let it be a moment of reflection. Think about that incredible journey water takes to get to you, its essential role in sustaining life, and what you can do to be a part of the solution to the global water crisis.
Because even though the challenges are significant, there's still hope. By working together and making conscious choices, we can definitely ensure a water-secure future for generations to come.
And that's a wrap on our deep dive into the global water crisis. We hope this episode has left you feeling informed, empowered, and maybe even a little thirsty for change. So we've talked about these huge systemic changes that need to happen, but for us regular folks, what can we actually do in our daily lives to, make a difference? It feels kind of daunting.
I get it, but you'd be surprised. It's a lot of those little things that add up, like fixing leaky faucets around your house.
Oh, right.
Or like taking shorter showers and being mindful of how much water you're using to water your lawn. Simple stuff.
Okay, yeah, those are definitely doable. What about being more aware of I think it's called the water footprint of the things we buy? Like, I've heard it takes a ton of water to produce meat, for example.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's virtual water. You're thinking of the hidden water that goes into the production of, well, everything. And you're right, meat production is a big one. But even things like the clothes we wear and our electronics, it all has a water footprint.
So it's about being a more conscious consumer then.
Right. Doing your research and supporting companies that are committed to sustainable practices. It all makes a difference.
Okay, so our individual actions do matter. That's actually pretty empowering.
They do. And don't underestimate the power of just talking about these issues, too, with your friends, family, community. Spreading awareness is so important in driving change.
Yeah, you're right. Sometimes it feels like these massive global problems are just like too big to tackle. But if we all do our part, even in small ways,
It adds up.
it adds up.
Exactly. And, remember that quote from the article, how water stress is the biggest crisis no one's talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's change that. Let's be the ones talking about it, raising awareness and pushing for solutions.
Consider it done. Thinking back to that wild podcast script about a world without water, it really makes you realize how precious, how unique our planet is.
It really does. And it makes you wonder, if life could theoretically evolve around other liquids, like the
Yeah.
script says, then what does that say about our responsibility to protect the water we do have here?
Whoa, that's a really, really powerful thought. It's not just about us.
It's not.
It's about making sure future generations inherit a world where water isn't a source of conflict or, scarcity, but like a shared resource that sustains us all.
Perfectly said. It's about recognizing that we're not just passive inhabitants of this planet. We have an active role to play in protecting it.
Love that. Okay, so to wrap things up, dear listener, next time you turn on the tap, maybe let it be a little moment of reflection. Think about that incredible journey water takes to get to you, its essential role in sustaining life, and what you can do to be part of the solution to the global water crisis.
Because even though the challenges are huge, there's still hope. By working together and making conscious choices, we can definitely ensure a water-secure future for everyone.
And that's a wrap on our deep dive into the global water crisis. We hope this episode has left you feeling informed, empowered, and maybe even a little thirsty for change.